getting their back pay. The national parks are reopening. And for most people, it probably feels like things are returning to normal. But that feeling of relief is a dangerous illusion because it's a temporary calm before the next totally predictable storm. Because while the news cycle might have moved on, the fundamental crisis that caused the shutdown hasn't been solved. It hasn't been addressed at all. The bill that reopened the government was just a short term patch, a political band aid on a gaping wound. And the next deadline is already circling on the calendar. So, yes, the government is back open, but don't get too comfortable with it. The clock's already ticking towards that next shutdown. And the date is set for January 30th, 2026, when tax season is supposed to tee off. So today, we're breaking down why the bill that just passed was only a temporary fix and what's set to happen when the government runs out of money all over again. And we'll get into the political gamesmanship that leads to these crises and the very real cost of shutdown, the most powerful government on earth is experiencing, and why this cycle of chaos has become the new normal in Washington. Now, this isn't just some distant political squabble, and this is about your money, your services, and the stability of the entire country. So, to understand why we're headed for another crisis, you have to look closely at the deal that ended the 43-day shutdown. Last week, towards the end of the week, middle of the night, on November 12th, 2025, President Trump signed a bill that was actually a two-part solution. And the first part was a clean continuing resolution, or CR, which is Washington's jargon for a stopgap measure. And it doesn't set a new budget, it just agrees to keep funding most of the government at the previous year's levels for a short period of time. And it's the legislative equivalent of hitting the snooze button. Ah, special shout out. I like this. He says the government caused the shutdown. Now, I disagree. Why do you believe that the Democrats are the problem with the shutdown? Because it is my understanding that there were some benefits that would impact elderly and low income individuals that Donald Trump was planning on doing away with or reshaping in some way, shape, or form that dramatically compromised the majority of the at risk community. And the Democratic Party did not want to agree to those kind of terms. So, exactly how did the Democrats cause the shutdown? Ah, well, if you're going to communicate with me on the podcast, don't be a dumbass. Speak to me appropriately or don't comment on the show. Because, as I've said before, we don't have to agree with one another, but you will articulate like an adult, a mature adult, the information that you would like to discuss, and then we can deliberate as to the facts. Okay, greatly appreciate that. Now, he claims that Democrats want to give illegals free health care. Now, I'm not aware of that. I'm actually, from what I understand, when you start talking about the asylum bills that are being passed, or not being passed, that was already passed before, that anyone who didn't get citizenship officially before they got here or in the citizenship process before they got here who files for asylum gets asylum benefits. And the asylum benefits include um, refugee housing, refugee healthcare, and refugee housing and healthcare is ideally free healthcare and free uh, housing. I've complained about that particular model myself, specifically because of the homeless people that are in the United States that were born and raised here that are being put in jail here because they don't have a place to go, but they are not expelling or extending the refugee programs to homeless Americans, which ironically we're going to be covering a show on, I believe, Saturday of this week as it relates to uh, the increased quantity of homeless population of our elderly generation. Uh, I don't believe that the ongoing funding of uh, asylum, because when you word it as illegals, you're implying that even if they don't want asylum, if they just swing by, they can just jump in and get free health care. Uh, First and foremost, whether they're legal or illegal, if they spend money in the United States, they're paying sales tax, which goes into our economy. They buy stuff, uh, at sticker price, which goes into our economy. Um, and then in order for them to acquire some type of benefit from the country, they would have to register for that, which requires them to then be documented. So the idiocracy about the idea of illegals getting free health care, you're not going to get any kind of care if you're not documented. If you snuck in and you're working as a dishwasher for cash under the table in a low income neighborhood, don't nobody know you're here. In order for you to get free health care, you have to fill out documents, identify yourself to some degree, and then notify the US government that you're in need of financial services, and then they provide you with those financial services. Now, the illegals are individuals that are here without any notification to the government. Those are the ones that's got Chicago burning down to the ground because the uh, ICE people are out there crashing into citizens and shooting at people and abducting folks that are American citizens, don't even qualify for deportation. And they're just harassing and terrorizing Chicago because of stuff like this. But for the sake of your comment, I mean, I don't believe that the entire government shutdown is solely based on your racial bias towards uh, immigration, which ironically is the melting pot of the United States because we were founded off of rejects from other countries, people who were kicked out of Britain and ejected from other countries around the world. They would come to the United States with the original 13 colonies, and everybody who was anybody was welcome here. When they first started slavery, it was manual labor to pay off debt, and it just spiraled into something worse. People sold themselves to pay off debt, where back in those days you couldn't hold the debt. You'd either be incarcerated or killed for unpaid debt. Now you just have a bad credit score. So when you think about how the United States was built from billions of people coming here from somewhere else and then starting a new life, that is quote unquote the American way. That is part of the quote unquote American dream. So when you claim illegals, the people who climbed over or slid under the wall, the people who shimmied between the bars and made their way into the country and then got a full-time job and paid their bills and bought groceries, they didn't steal anything, they didn't commit any crimes. You're complaining about those people getting health care. We're not talking about the ones that are stealing rims off of cars and playing loud stereo systems and drag racing and doing donuts in Walmart parking lot. Oh, but wait, those are Americans. Oh shit. So if you like, you can tell me what the real reason is why you think the government was shut down because of the Democrats. Or if you don't know, I mean, you can by all means take your time to go and look it up. We'll be here for at least an hour or so. So you got plenty of time to do your research and get better acquainted EQRC7587. Couldn't even spell his own name up there. Now, this CR funds that we were just talking about, the nine parts of the government that were left in limbo were the ones that had everybody just in an uproar. And it covered major departments like Homeland Security. And Homeland Security was supposed to protect us from 9/11, but we're not even going to go into that. The Justice Department, where I mean, look at what's happening in New York and Chicago. They're not doing their jobs either. Then we have transportation. Now those guys deserve a raise. And then education, for Christ's sakes, the public schools should get more funding than the private schools. My personal observation. But these departments are going to start getting more funds or the same quantity of funds back, but only through January 30th of 2026. Now, that clean label is key. It means the bill had no controversial policy changes, postponing the big fights until the next deadline. So, any controversial, whether it is allegedly funding illegals or legitimately defunding um, healthcare coverages, retirement plans, or any other SNAP or other low income benefits that would have impacted over 46 million Americans. Instead of those topics being discussed, this bill only covered making sure that the workers get paid. Okay. However, the second part of the deal was more permanent. Lawmakers managed to pass full year funding for three specific areas: the Department of Veterans Affairs and Agriculture, which is going to be your VA benefits, and the legislative branch. For them, the budget crisis is over until September of 2026. Okay? So you ain't got to worry about whether or not you're going to get your benefits. Your benefits is coming. If you serve, if you showed up and was at roll call and you ain't do nothing else but put on a uniform, you, you still getting paid. Okay. Now, this patchwork deal brought immediate vital relief for a lot of people. So, thanks to the full funding of the Department of Agriculture, crucial food aid programs like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, which is WIC, are now secure for the rest of the fiscal year, where you might not even experience the partial pay for November. That may as well like have gone away. You might actually get your full benefits released this month and then be back on your regular payment cycle if you get paid at the beginning of the month. And this is a massive weight off the shoulders of over 42 million Americans who rely on SNAP benefits, which were on the brink of collapse, right? But for other services, the fix is temporary. Air traffic controllers, for example, are back on the job with their funding restored, but their agency, the FAA, is only funded until the 30th of January. That's the deadline. Okay. So who gets paid? Because of the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act of 2019, all 1.4 million workers are guaranteed full back pay for the 43 days they went without income. This applies both to furloughed employees who were sent home and essential employees who had to work without a paycheck. Now, my dog, everybody who was at their house twiddling their thumbs for 45 days should have been spending extra time with their family, because for you to be at your damn house for a 45-day paid leave and then you still got your vacation time, your PTO time, your sick time, that is a blessing and a half. Matter of fact, since this happened, you should have been able to put your PTO time in there and just stick it in right alongside some vacation time and turn your 43 day vacation into like a 2 month vacation and just chill for a little bit. But see, some people they make their uh job their way of life, so they don't want to stay home. You feel me? They want to go back to work. They can't wait to get out of here, right? Now, Michael makes a good point. Still need to vote some of these bad boys out of the office just because they fix some shit don't change nothing. He said, baby boom in 9 months. Well, it's going to happen again. Now, while the White House has urged agencies to get that money out as quickly as possible, it doesn't erase the hardship of drained savings and late fees. Critically, this guarantee does not extend to most federal contractors, the janitors, security guards, and cafeteria workers who also lost their incomes. For many of them, that money is gone for good. They're not even going to get a supplement. Ultimately, the deal was a solution born of exhaustion, not agreement. So, for 9 of 12 government funding bills, it's just reset the clock on a time bomb that we have yet to fully unravel. So, why does this keep happening? He says savings. Yeah, that's right. The savings is out the window. How can the United States, a global superpower by reputation, not by debt deficit, with $30 trillion economy that is in the negative $30 trillion, might we add, not a $30 trillion profit commodity, find itself unable to do something as basic as funding its own government? Well, the answer is a broken process that has been weaponized for political gain. So the way it's supposed to work is pretty straightforward, at least on paper. The government's fiscal year starts on October 1st. Before that, Congress is supposed to pass 12 separate appropriations bills, each covering a different part of the government: defense, agriculture, energy, and so on. Think of it like having 12 budget categories for your household: housing, groceries, transportation, etc. The House and Senate are supposed to pass their own versions, work out the differences, and send the final bill to the president to sign. Simple enough, right? Well, in today's hyperpartisan Washington, that process is a distant memory. Passing all 12 bills on time is now so rare, it's a historic achievement. Instead, the budget process has become the main battlefield for political wars. Look, right? We call it a budget, but we really just arguing over whose bills are going to get paid. It's a calculation of debt since we're in the negative. It ain't really all that much of a budget. If we was free flowing 30 trillion extra dollars through the country where we were positive, I don't think we would have much to argue about. Before the 1980s, a funding lapse wasn't a huge deal. Agencies mostly kept running. But in 1980 and 1981, legal opinions from Attorney General Benjamin Silverett reinterpreted an old law called the Anti Deficiency Act. And these opinions stated that without explicit approval from Congress, federal agencies had no legal authority to spend money. Now, this effectively invented the modern government shutdown, a total halt of all non essential functions. Now, this gave politicians a powerful new weapon. By refusing to pass funding bills, a party could hold an entire government hostage to get what it wanted on completely unrelated issues, which brings a question when the young man came in here claiming that the Democrats wanted to fund illegals, and that's why the government shut down. The Democrats weren't the ones with demands that they weren't going to fold on. And the person who didn't sign off on the bills that were being presented were the Republicans. And the person who, Republican, runs the country and declared himself that he was not going to compromise was the president. So the reason why there was no negotiation was because there are certain contingencies on both sides of the table that neither party is willing to compromise. And the party with the most responsibility and authority to approve and push forward a bill was shut down by Republicans, not Democrats. While the disagreement could be something that the Democrats proposed, the Democrats aren't the one that shut the shit down. So, got to prove the young man. So he hasn't come back yet with any information. I think his Siri has broken on him. He was supposed to come back and put some knowledge down, but I don't think he had any when he jumped in the comment section. But we saw using the government shutdown as a political power in the 90s with fights between President Clinton and the Speaker Newt Gingrich, and we saw it in 2013 over funding for the Affordable Care Act, and we saw it in 2018, 2019 shut down over the border wall funding, which again was Donald Trump. So when we think about, let's remember who was in office when the shutdown happened: Bill Clinton, Obama, Donald Trump. Now, Obama, we can say, is a Democratic Party. Clinton might have been a Democratic Party, but Trump in 18 and Trump in 25 is the Republican Party. So when we say who shut it down, because again, the border wall was Donald Trump's thing. The border wall was not the Democratic Party. Defunding at risk services that are being provided by the government and making those services private funding, which was Donald Trump's whole platform, was to stop giving away money and sell services. Donald Trump's situation, that's what he's trying to do right now. That's part of the reason why the government got shut down right now. Obama with the Affordable Care Act, making health insurance more affordable. That was the reason why the government shut down back then. And if I remember correctly, Bill Clinton was doing something with the food stamp program back then, forcing people to go back to work instead of just living off of the government. And it's a high stakes game of political chicken, and the American people in every one of these shutdowns always loses. Michael says is $3 trillion in debt and saying we're the richest country in the world uh, contradict the truth. Actually, I believe we're $30 trillion in debt, if I remember correctly. Uh, but yes, they say that we're in truth, the that statement of richest country in the world might fit Dubai better than the United States. Now, we are the most wasteful country in the world. We might have a few more billionaires in our country than other countries around the world, and they might declare us the richest country around the world because we have the most billionaires on pocket. But as far as government budgets and government funding and government financial stability, no, we probably have one of the largest spending economies because Americans are wasteful. That's why 170 million TikTok users is a multi-trillion-dollar business deal that the US government must get 50% of the profits of, but 73% of the country is poor. So how are we technically the richest country in the world And the largest majority of us are struggling from paycheck to paycheck. And for the last 43 days, not only were we struggling from paycheck to paycheck, we were panicking because the paycheck stopped coming in. Yeah, good point, Michael. Special shout out to Michael. But this brings us back to continuing resolutions or the CRs. Because it's so hard to agree on a full budget, Congress is now addicted to these short term fixes. They punt the decision down the road for a few months or weeks, and this creates constant uncertainty. The government agencies can't play long term. Federal contractors don't know if their contracts will be valid next month or not, and the country lurches from one self inflicted crisis to the next, all because incentivizes brinkmanship over basic governance. It's also important to separate a government shutdown from a debt ceiling crisis. Though they often get tangled together, a shutdown is about Congress failing to approve new money for future government operations. A debt ceiling crisis is about Congress refusing to let the Treasury pay for spending it has already approved. It's the difference between arguing over next month's budget and arguing over whether to pay the credit card bill for stuff you already bought. Both are dangerous, but a debt default would be a global financial catastrophe, while a government shutdown is just an incredibly costly and dysfunctional act of national self sabotage. So we're not actually having the type of debt crisis where we're refusing to pay off our debts. It is just that we're refusing to agree on what we're going to put our money towards going forward. Now, the political games in Washington can feel abstract, but the 43-day shutdown was a brutal reminder that the consequences are devastatingly real. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a slow motion disaster that hurt millions of Americans and cost the economy billions. Just make Trump empire and give him the throne. 4 years is not long enough to accomplish much, if anything. At that man's age, you're gonna have him start up one of them Kim Jong Un dictatorships, and he's just gonna die on the throne, right? I can't bank on that. However, there was talk about the possibility for three-term president, and he's only done 2 terms because this is his second term. And if he can do a third term, and the same people who are shaving off their hair and walking through the streets with no bras on vote for the man the second time, the same people who was out there doing their pride marches and voting for him the first time, if they vote for him again, he'll be back in office for a third term. More than 70% of Americans voted for the guy. Men, women, trans, homosexuals, LGBTQ community. The majority of people voted for him. And if they don't like what he is doing, midterm elections is in 2026. So if you want him to stop, now is the time to change your decision. But for those of you that are like me, that are putting our money into investment opportunities and taking advantage of the everything that's chaotic in the country, that's really throwing the stock market through an unpredictable loop, ride that wave because it don't really matter to me who's in office. As long as I'm getting 25% back on my return, invest wisely. Said Elvis died on the throne. Yeah, but Elvis did not die on the governmental throne. So let's start with the federal workforce, the human casualties of this political war. Because about 1.4 million federal workers went out of pay for 43 days. And these aren't just the bureaucrats in DC, because over 80% of federal workers lived and worked outside the DC area in every single state. And they're our neighbors: TSA agents, food safety inspectors, FBI agents, and park rangers. Some were deemed essential, meaning they had to show up to work every day knowing they wouldn't get paid. And this included the air traffic control workers and law enforcement. Hopefully, now that they're getting paid, they'll stop being assholes in Chicago. Imagine being responsible for the safety of thousands of travelers while wondering how you'll pay your mortgage. I would have two planes crash and be like, oh shit, if I had a paycheck, I could have focused on their trajectories, right? Now, the stress is going to be immense. So, for non essential workers, it meant being furloughed, sent home, legally barred from doing your current job, your income cut off completely, and you're unable to go and find yourself a permanent replacement because they're likely to call you back at any time. Stories poured in from across the country where federal employees driving for Uber, visiting food banks uh, for the time that the shutdown was happening. This is stuff that's happening for the first time, and it's making heartbreaking choices about which bills to leave unpaid, and which is incredible because I was telling you guys about this, all of these things to help you stay afloat until it came back. Because, like I said before, I told y'all in October that we're likely to get it back by the middle of November because the Democratic Party cannot have their constituents without resources through December. They had to figure something out. Now, while back pay helps, it doesn't undo the damage. It doesn't repay late fees or restore a drained savings account. And don't forget the federal contractors, the janitors, IT specialists, and cafeteria workers. They lost their income, but for most of them, there is no back pay. Their losses are permanent. They're not getting shit. And the damage rippled far beyond the federal workers because the shutdown was a direct hit on the U.S. economy. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office estimated that the shorter 35-day shutdown in 2018 2019 cost the economy $11 billion. Projections for this longer shutdown are even higher, with some estimates suggesting a weekly economic hit of billions of dollars, several billions of dollars. They said the total for 35 days was 11 billion. We lost way more than that this time around, and that's because when the government stops spending, it hurts the businesses that aren't even affiliated, that aren't actually government businesses, because it stops processing small business loans and permits, grinding commerce to a halt, where nobody's able to get a mortgage on their houses. They're not able to get advances. SBA loans aren't being given out as much. We saw this in specific ways, like fewer FDA food safety inspections, the closure of national parks cost local tourism economies billions of dollars. The strain of the FAA led to widespread flight disruptions. Like I told you guys about one 14-hour flight that I had to do across America for all the delays. It's a nightmare for travelers and a huge blow to the airlines. Key scientific research was halted, and with some experiments ruined completely because it required daily monitoring. Crucially, the shutdown threatened the food security of the most vulnerable individuals in the country And with that Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, helping to feed over 42 million people, that was thrown into complete chaos where the government scrambled to keep benefits flowing, but the system was on the brink of collapse because they were only going to give partial benefits in November and no benefits in December. And that was going to be it. And you know that when your benefits lapse, you get a 60-day layover for 1 month worth of benefits. So if they only gave you 1 month worth of benefits or half a month of benefits in November and you not getting nothing in December, if they did kick it back up in January, you might not get your distribution until February. And you was gonna be on a pole or something trying to get the food for them kids because you ain't had no money coming in to cover that. And is leaving millions of Americans fearing they couldn't feed their children as a result of this. And this is the true cost of a shutdown. It's not a budget saving measure. It costs taxpayers billions of dollars, and it's an unmitigated self inflicted wound, and all of it was completely avoidable. It really was. So, with the clock ticking, and it's ticking down quickly, what happens when January 30th, 2026 arrives? Congress and the White House will be right back where they started. The nine massive unfinished appropriations bills covering everything from homeland security to education will still be waiting for a compromise that seems as distant as ever. Because you got to understand, the bills for the budget are being coupled with political complaints that have nothing to do with the budget. Like the little boy that was on here earlier in the show, blaming Democrats providing benefits to um, immigrants as a quote unquote issue. There isn't a bill that is producing funding for immigrants in the categories that we just discussed. That is a political platform that is being leveraged due to the budget crisis, right? So if that political platform was not being leveraged due to the budget crisis, we wouldn't have a budget crisis. We also got that, what, $600 billion for defense. That's another political issue for the budget crisis. And if that wasn't being leveraged, we wouldn't have a budget crisis. So the political views of both Democrats and Republicans are negotiating tools for the underlining budget. If you don't agree to my bill, I won't pay your constituents. That's where our shutdown comes from. The heart of the conflict is always the same because one side's demanding major spending cuts and policy changes, like Trump is cutting off the benefits for elderly individuals and other such high risk individuals. And Democrats don't want to do that. And the other is refusing to negotiate with what they call a gun to their heads style environment. The biggest flashpoint this time is the extension and enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies, which helps millions of affordable health insurance and uh, are set to expire, which wasn't about immigrants. That was about poor people. That was about poor Americans, where the person who made that comment, more than likely, another poor American. Just because you vote Republican doesn't mean you're not poor. Just because you wear a red manga hat doesn't mean you're not poor. Your political view, most Americans do not vote in the direction of their money. It is a popularity contest, not in our best interest voting. We're supposed to be voting in our best interest, but that's not what we do. We don't like somebody because we don't like that person. We don't vote someone in because they're a male or a female, or they're not voting someone in because they're black, or they're voting them in because they're black. They're voting them in until we can have the first female in office. But the race and gender discussions, the oh I know that person because I seen them on TV discussion, none of that is their political platforms. What they plan to do when they have the authority to take action, and that's what we don't pay attention to. Nobody votes on that. So the Affordable Care Act from Barack Obama, which helped poor people afford some type of health insurance instead of being too sick to go to the doctor and can't afford to go to work because you're too sick to go to work and you don't got enough money to go to the doctor. Infinite round robin situation. Obama forced insurance companies to lower premiums so that you could get some kind of benefits, so that you can go to the doctor and get some kind of health care instead of just work until you die because you can't afford health care. And that Affordable Care Act is what they fighting right now. That ain't got shit to do with immigrants. But young man up there thinking it did. Democrats have made extending them a top priority, extending the Affordable Care Act, while many Republicans are staunchly opposed. They don't want the Affordable Care Act to continue because privatizing it and charging top dollar is going to change the way the country runs itself. And in the usual fights over defense spending, which got nothing to do with immigrants, border security, that's when immigrants come up, and environmental regulations, which also has nothing to do with immigrants, you have a recipe for a gridlock. As the deadline gets closer, we're heading down one of three possible paths. Scenario one, which is the optimistic path, a grand bargain. And this is where everyone suddenly decides to be reasonable. Chastened by the damage of the 43-day shutdown, leaders from both parties engage in a serious negotiation. They make painful concessions and find a middle ground. They pass the remaining nine bills, funding the government for the rest of the fiscal year. Now, this would be a grand bargain, bringing stability back to the government. Unfortunately, it's also the least likely scenario. The political incentives that reward fighting over compromise are just too powerful. Scenario number two, the family path, more familiar approaches. Kick the can again. That's going to be what they're used to doing. Family sticking together. We're going to push this off for the next generation. Fuck it. Not our problem. This is the path of the least resistance and the one Washington loves to take. As January 30th nears and it's clear no big deal is coming, lawmakers will scramble to do the bare minimum. They'll pass they'll pass another continuing resolution or CR bill. And this would likely fund the government for another few weeks or months, pushing the real deadline further into 2026. This avoids the immediate pain of a shutdown but solves absolutely nothing. It means we'll be having this exact same conversation again in March or April of 2026. It's not a solution, it's a postponement. Exactly. Lamed up. He just throwing it down. Now, there is a more destructive path, shutdown 2.0, because we're going to be dealing with tax season. This is the most pessimistic outcome, but also frighteningly the most realistic path for us to go down. The deadline arrives, and both sides are still dug in, no compromise, no last minute CR, and at midnight on January 30th, 2026, large parts of the federal government shut down again. ideally impacting the IRS. And if this happens, we'll see an instant replay of the chaos we just went through. But maybe worse, furlough notices will go out, the national parks will close, the financial and emotional toll on federal workers will resume again, the political bitterness will make it even harder to find a solution. And this isn't fear mongering, it's the logical endpoint of the path that we're on. This cycle of shutdowns and last minute deals is more than just a weird quirk of our politics. It's a symptom of a much deeper problem, and it's corrosive. This isn't just about budgeting, it's about the erosion of trust, stability, and Americans standing in the world. Oh, he said, good. Will the IRS be closed also? I'm more than expecting the IRS to be closed because the IRS is a government agency, and I do believe that the IRS is part of the government funding. But we could always triple, double, triple check. Let's see how the IRS is affected by a government shutdown. Come on. Because I said that, hey, they're going to be on a skeleton crew if nothing else. Uh, so to answer your question, during a government shutdown, the IRS faces restricted operations but continues critical functions to enforce tax laws, process returns, and protect government properties. IRS staffing and service disruptions is going to be the key. Approximately half of IRS employees are furloughed, and in person taxpayer assistance centers are closed, halting appointments and walk in services until government reopens, which means that you're primarily going to be filing your taxes using TurboTax, H&R Block, or other such third party agencies that you can utilize online on your computer or over your phone. Live phone support is significantly limited. Most automated applications, including IRS.gov and self e file systems, remain unavailable, but responses to taxpayer questions and paper tax return processings are delayed. The IRS Taxpayer Associate or Advocate Services TAS is largely shut down, and the U.S. tax court proceedings are postponed, with trial sessions canceled if the shutdown persists. Now, as it pertains to filing tax returns, the tax laws remain in effect, so taxpayers must continue to file and pay taxes if they're going to file or pay taxes during the tax, which means that the April 15th deadline is still the deadline. If the tax forms are available before the 31st of January, you can utilize them in order to file. E-file returns and direct deposit refunds on error-free filings are still processed. Paper returns, business, trust, and more complex refunds face extensive delays. So if you're looking to get the money back, it might be a little bit of time to get the money back. But if you're doing a error-free processing, they should still be able to check that off the list under their skeleton crew and not have any problems. Now, the deadlines for the returns, such as October 15th extension for the 2024 returns, and payments remain unchanged, and interest penalties occur on unpaid balances. So if you owe the government some money somewhere and you haven't given them what you were supposed to give them, then they're going to still charge you for it. Most audits, enforcement auctions, and legal guidance activities are paused during the shutdown. However, Crucial compliance activities to protect statute of limitations and criminal investigations will continue. So if they were going to audit you before the deadline, they're going to audit your ass before the deadline. But if you're not in the deadline criteria, they're probably waiting until after the government shut down to come and get you. Once reopened, though, the IRS faces significant backlogs and delays in taxpayer assistance and heavy demand for pending services. So taxpayers should expect continued disruptions for quite some time. So hopefully that answers your question about whether or not you're going to be doing your taxes. He said, just check Google. You still got to pay, darn it. Well, you check with me before you check with Google, but it's good that you check with Google. Now, make sure that you guys like and subscribe. You can always send an email or a text message to the IRS and see what they tell you about it. But I just gave you all the ins and outs about it. They're not going to be in full effect, but they will be um, affected, and it will be delayed a little bit. Now, the constant brinkmanship shatters public trust. And that's going to be the first thing that we have to recognize. Make sure that you guys remember to like and subscribe, like Michael said. And then when the government repeatedly fails to keep its own lights on, it tells its citizens it's unreliable and dysfunctional. We already knew that, though. Majority of Americans complain about how the government is run, but none of us try to change it by either running for office or voting in people with better decision making skills. But the cynicism is still going to be very toxic. And why would anyone trust a type of government that can't tackle big problems when and how will we even give them a big problem when they can't even agree to pay its own employees? That makes absolutely no sense. This sounds like an ex-wife. The most conflictual but accurate statement that anyone can make. Yes, yes, because they're extremely combative, non-cooperative. Second, it's a genuine risk to our national security because operating on a skeleton crew, so many more things can happen when we don't have the proper personnel, and then the personnel that we have is not focused. When essential personnel like the military and federal law enforcement stay on the job, but their support systems are crippled, FBI investigations are hampered, and cybersecurity operations are understaffed. Our adversaries watch this. They see a nation so divided it's willing to voluntarily weaken itself. Our allies see it too, and they wonder if the US is a stable partner. Third, the economic damage goes far beyond the immediate hit to the GDP because the constant threat of shutdowns creates a climate of uncertainty that chills investment and long term planning. The United States has long been seen as the bedrock of the global financial system because of its political stability. Every shutdown chips away at that reputation, making the US look less like a mature democracy and more like a volatile democracy, extremely volatile democracy. And finally, we can't lose sight of the human cost because it's the cost to the public servant treated like a political pawn. It's the cost to the small business owner whose cafe near a federal building is empty for over a month. It's the cost to the scientist whose research is derailed and the family waiting for their tax refund or veterans benefits. This is the bigger picture. We are watching a slow motion failure of core function of our republic. And the issue isn't which party is to blame for any single shutdown, like the Young Bucks tried to jump in at the beginning of the show. That's not really all it's about. Until we fix the underlying problems, we're doomed to repeat this exact same cycle. So here we are. The government is reopened again, but the crisis is far from over. The bill signed on November 12th wasn't a peace treaty. It was a temporary ceasefire for the holidays so that we can have our Thanksgiving, waste of money, have our Christmas, waste of money, and then 30 days after Christmas be back in the same bullshit because it recognizing being in a long and destructive political war has solved none of the fundamental disagreements by passing this bill. All it did was put a new date on the calendar for the very next fight on January 30th, 2026. And what's the solution? Well, we have to get down to the core of who wants what. And then as a people, we have to rationalize which one we're going to get. Um, just bringing up a topic, we had a hardcore Republican dive in here and just immediately blame the Democrats for a topic that has absolutely nothing to do with the budget. And that type of confusion is one of the reasons why we can't agree, we can't get along. I'm actually glad that this isn't one of those like slap down podcasts where people are just cursing each other out about stuff they know nothing about, where they're standing on either the red side or the blue side just because that's the side that they were told they're supposed to stand on, not because they have any factual knowledge to support their standing there. Because you got to remember, the 2025 Gen Zs, more than 75% of them don't know what the fuck's going on. They have the right to vote, but they do not invest the time to learn what they're voting for. So it's a popularity contest. If it doesn't directly impact them in the moment, they're only going to vote once every 4 years. You're technically supposed to vote just about every year. Every other year, you're voting for something different, but ideally every year because you got 2 years for Congress, 2 years for judges, 4 years for higher level judges, 2 years for the president, every 2 years for the president, but you get a new president once every 4 years. You get you've got your Fed judges, you've got your police chief, you've got your sheriff, which are two different police departments. You've got your government worker raises, you've got your teacher salaries, you've got roadway construction, um, taxation on goods and commerce, all these things that we're supposed to be voting on. And the only time that we vote is once every 4 years, which means that the decisions that piss us off the most is left up to 500 and some people who don't even know who the fuck we are. And we do not know what they want or what they do or how they do it to make the decisions that are being made in order for us to see what happened that we just have to accept it and deal with it because we didn't put in our 2 cents. How many of you know who your elected officials are? How many of you can name your elected officials right now on the channel? Not many. How many of you called or emailed or wrote a letter to your elected official? So the person who was part of the group of people that had the government shut down for 43 days, you don't even know who the fuck that guy is. And that is part of the reason why they don't do what we want them to do. They do what they want or need to do to get through whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish. The solution is to change the entire White House out with a large quantity of regular people who can start making sense in decisions. If we change Congress to jury duty and have people actually run the country for 2 years, especially folks that make less than $100,000 a year, you get a $165,000 a year salary to make decisions for 2 years, and you have job security where you can go back to your old job after that. Fuck yeah, you would have some completely different decisions being made after that. But that's not how we run our country. We essentially have pawns who are paid to do what they're supposed to do. Their constituents are not us. Their constituents are the lobbyists that are funding their salaries and the people who are putting a word in order for them to get a promotion or for them to change seats and get a different backing from somewhere else. Their motivations are not the general population. Their motivations are in that room and the people who control that room. And we've seen how the very process of funding our government has been turned into a extremely deadly weapon. And we've seen the real world carnage that this game inflicts on our federal workers, on the economy, and on public transit. And we've also seen the paths ahead from a hopeful but unlikely, extremely unlikely bargain to the all too familiar cycle of kicking the can down the road, or the worst case scenario that I extremely expect to see, another long winded shutdown. Oh, of course, because they have to promote their own individual agendas in the decisions that they make. The main takeaway is this: the next government shutdown shouldn't be a surprise anymore. So you should be, all that extra money that you're getting back after you pay all the money that you borrow from the folks that you borrowed money from, whatever's left over, you're not wasting it. You're putting it away for the next upcoming. Matter of fact, just start paying all your bills through March right now so that when that government shutdown comes, you're good, because it's about to happen again. And it's not going to be an accident. It's a predictable, almost scheduled event born from a deeply broken system. We've gotten used to this cycle of crisis, but we can't afford to become numb to it. Yeah, it shouldn't be a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise at all. But what do you guys think? Is there a better way to fund the government? Can our political leaders break this cycle? Or are we just stuck with this chaotic new normal? Let me know what your thoughts is in the comments below, because I try my best to read as many of them as I can, as often as I can. And if you found some of these breakdowns very useful and want to stay ahead of the issues that actually matter, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell, as well as liking today's show. Even if you're watching us on Twitter or Twitch, it really helps the channels out and makes sure that you won't miss our future analyses. Now, he says, want to get want to get on the hamster wheel? Shit, not I, said the black guy. I do not want to be on the hamster wheel. Some people find it entertaining to get on the hamster wheel, but I do not. I actually navigate away from uh, government contracts, and I navigate away from working for other people so that I don't have to deal with these types of behaviors. I don't get furloughed. I'm the boss. I get when nobody else gets. Yeah, I pay the workers, but no, I'm not being laid off. You know what I mean? But at the same time, though, not everybody can put themselves in a position where they're self sustainable. Not everybody can put themselves in a position where they're self funded. A lot of times, a lot of times, we find ourselves in a situation where we just don't have enough. And we just got to figure out where we're going to get it from legally. Sometimes we pool our money together by living with other people. Sometimes we pool our money together by dating the wrong person and dealing in a toxic relationship because they make enough money to pay for the standard of living we have. Some of us allow ourselves to be devalued by people who are paying our way for us, but we have to find a way to survive. Now, I strongly recommend that we find a better way, a more self sufficient way, a more financially stable way, but it really requires us to look for an alternative regardless of what we do. But until we find that, I'm going to say, ladies, as long as the situation doesn't make sense, I'm going to keep asking you, ladies, to make it make sense. So, ladies, please make it make sense. And then, fellas, take this information and utilize it to help yourselves become higher value men. And, ladies, while you know that this is a male driven podcast from the male's perspective, passive is almost as good as residual. Uh, Make sure that you know, ladies, y'all can take this information and utilize it to make yourselves higher value women as well. Make the change that you need to make within the things that you can control so that your life can be a better life. Don't dwell on the things you cannot control, navigate around them. With that being said, I'm your host, Xander. Thank you for coming to This and That, where we talk about this, that, and everything in between. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.
Chase validation, now I validate myself. Building inner strength, putting doubt upon the shelf. No more unnecessary drama, no more wasted time. Climbing higher, constantly making my own climb. My network is my net worth. Choose your company wise. Surround yourself with eagles, not with sheep in disguise. Every interaction is a reflection of my brand. Quality over quantity, that's my personal command.